Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Stephan Livera podcast. Joining me today, or rejoining me today, is Antoine Poinsot. He is a Bitcoin developer and also working at Wizard Sardine, who are known for Liana mainly, and also you might know them with Revolt. So first of all, welcome back to the show, Antoine.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. And so we're going to be talking about the Great Consensus Cleanup, as well as some Bitcoin Core vulnerabilities that were recently disclosed. But first, let's chat a little bit about Liana and what's the latest there.
Well, Liana is going good, doing good. The team grew up a little bit, so allowed us to deliver more than we could before, because it's always frustrating when you have a lot of demand from users and you can't deliver everything at the same time. And we are, also we cleared up a lot of misunderstanding on the use cases as well. People had some idea of what Liana did, and it was fixed, and we had to explain a lot, going to conferences, talking to people, and there's definitely a lot of interest in the inheritance use case. And now the main thing is, so there was first step, a lot of misunderstanding on the use case, and second step, it was a bit hard to use the wallet. To get started with the wallet, you have to use your own full node and everything. So that's our focus right now, trying to make the wallet more usable for the regular guy interested in securing his inheritance.
Gotcha. Yeah, and listeners interested, you can check out my earlier episode with Kevin, where we went kind of more in depth on some of those aspects of it. I'll put the links in the show notes as always. And so, yeah, I guess the other interesting thing is just, I'm curious how you're seeing the appetite for more complicated uses of Bitcoin, right? Because I guess a lot of people up until now might just be thinking, oh, just single signature, my standard 12 words, don't really think about too much about anything else. But also, as you said, there's a lot of, let's say, high net worth Bitcoiners, and a lot of those people are very interested in inheritance, right? Because we're all going to die someday.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that they can pass them on. So what has it been like getting people on board with the inheritance idea?
With the idea, it was definitely, we didn't have to get them on board. They were
Right.
already onboarded, and it looks like...
Oh, sorry. I mean, I guess I should clarify. How did you get people comfortable with the security of what you're implementing as opposed to, the idea of inheritance?
I think people get it very easily about the security of the time lock. Let's say the trade-off, because everything is trade-offs anyways, and you have these keys that can always spend, and these other keys that can only spend after a time lock, and you have to access your wallet, let's say every other year, in order to keep the second key inactive. And it's a trade-off that a lot of people are actually interested in making in order to make sure that they have a recovery solution. And it's also the case that I believe obviously that it's the best trade-off available, because you can't do it really otherwise, right? Because you can use a multi-sig, but everything is only in one dimension, only in the number of keys and the threshold for spending in the keys. But if you want to have self-custody at time t and not have self-custody at time t+1 because you're dead, you have to have some mechanism in place, such as you're in self-custody and then you're not. So once we explain it to users, I think that they do get it pretty easily.
Yeah, and so just refresh my memory here. I'm just trying to think back to my conversation with Kevin. This is the one where you need to cycle it roughly every 12 to 18 months, right? And
yes, exactly.
In that time, after a certain time period, it's those coins are spendable by somebody else. And
Yes.
This is the important thing to understand, is this is not just like at an application level. This is not like on somebody's server. This is like at the Bitcoin protocol level. That's the important point to understand here,
because,
right?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of communication around inheritance use cases also, which can be fine. People can use whatever they want as long as they understand the trade-offs. But sometimes there is very trusted solutions with regard to the recovery mechanisms for the heirs. With Liana, the trade-off is that you have to refresh your coins, but it's enforced on Bitcoin. Like your heir can never spend your coin as long as you're alive and using your wallet every 15 months. So
I guess the conversation right now, or at least the current technology, is that it just requires this, let's say, annual on average ish time, let's call it recycle. Is that the term you're using? You kind of have to
Yeah, we're using
and,
refresh, recycle. We are not
refresh. Yeah,
perfect
whatever.
yet.
The term, it's not a huge deal, but the point is you have to do a transaction every year to kind of make it to stay in the time lock that you in your desired time lock aspect. So that's probably just a main trade-off today, and hopefully we'll see what happens in the future. If more covenant technology comes to Bitcoin, then maybe that could be changed also.
Yeah, definitely. Some types of covenants could help to have the time lock start ticking by the time that you want to trigger a recovery, and you don't have to touch it every other year. But we're not there yet, and it's already working well.
Okay, yeah. So I guess we'll leave that for a future conversation. I mean, because we don't know if we'll ever get that. But let's talk a little bit now about the Great Consensus Cleanup. So I know this is something you've been working on a lot recently and trying to push that forward. So let's try to, again, take it back from the top here just to keep it accessible for everybody. What is the Great Consensus Cleanup?
It's originally a soft fork proposal from Matt Corallo in 2019 about fixing bugs in the Bitcoin protocol, which require a soft fork to be fixed and can be fixed only with a soft fork. So it's trying to fix the cost, potentially worst case cost to join the network, to participate in the Bitcoin network, to run a node. It tries to fix issues with timestamps and how we manage time on the chain and how it can be gamed by attackers with mining power and other technicalities in the Bitcoin protocol.
Right. And so what would you say are the main items that are trying to be fixed inside the Great Consensus Cleanup?
I think the two most worrying bugs right now are the validation time for blocks and especially the Timewarp bug.
Gotcha. And so let's talk through some of those. So let's start with the Timewarp. What is the Timewarp bug?
The Timewarp bug is, all right, let's describe how Bitcoin actually, well, let's refresh the memory of the auditors around how Bitcoin actually manages time. So on Bitcoin, every node is going to receive blocks broadcasted through the network and created by miners. And attached to this block is a timestamp usually about the current time when the miner found the block. And as more mining power is going to join the network, blocks are going to be found quicker, faster. And as more hash rate is leaving the network, for instance, if there is a change in the price of Bitcoin in dollars, maybe some miners are going to turn off the machine. And so as a whole, the network is going to find block less faster. And in order to make the time, the time of the blocks intervals on average 10 minutes, nodes are going to change the difficulty for miners to find blocks. So as there is more hash rate, they're going to increase the difficulty. As there is less hash rate, they're going to lower the difficulty. This is done every 2016 blocks, so which is roughly equivalent to 2 weeks. So basically what every block and so every node, and since it's a deterministic process, every single node on the network can do this math, and they're all going to do the same math and arrive at the same conclusion. So they're going to every single node, every 2016 blocks is going to check the timestamp of the block 2 weeks ago. So the block 2016 ago, and the next block and the last block, and it's going to compare the two timestamps. And if it took more than 2 weeks to mine the last 2016 blocks, it's going to lower the difficulty, otherwise it's going to increase the difficulty. The issue, so that's all great and nice. The issue is there is an off by one here since the original implementation of Bitcoin by Satoshi, which is that actually it's not the 2016 last blocks which are considered, it's the 2015 last blocks which are considered. And In this case, it means that the first block of a period is not the last block of the previous period. It means that the retarget periods do not overlap. It means which allows miners to try to always keep back in time the block timestamp of the first block of a period while continuously moving forward in the future the times of all the other blocks, including the last block of the period. And as they're doing that, they're faking that it takes them more time and more time to mine the blocks, even though it did not. And so they are lowering the difficulty. As they lower the difficulty, they can perform the attack even faster. And so after, let's say, the attack takes to the first retarget period, which is 2 weeks, at the end, they are going to be able to keep the first block in the past. They are going to start another retarget period. At the end of this retarget period, they are going to end up with nodes are going to believe that it took them 4 weeks to mine the 2 weeks block period. So they are going to halve the difficulty. So they are going to find the next 2016 blocks in 1 week. And then they're going to do the same thing. It's going to halve again and halve again. And as they perform the attacks, it gets exponentially faster, essentially. And they can pull down the difficulty of mining blocks at the minimum, which is 1, at the minimum in 39 days. It means
Wow. Okay. So in the space of 39 days, now, I guess let me understand it. Let me ask you so I'm understanding it correctly. So you're saying in the space of 39 days, assuming malicious miners, they could make it so that they could just start like lowering the difficulty dramatically and just like mining blocks out really fast. That's the implication.
Assuming
here, right?
a majority of malicious miners.
Gotcha. And so, as you're saying, that would require some level of either a 51%, like a large miner, or a cartel of miners to collude to do this. And I guess the argument you're making here, or that could be made here, is they might have an incentive to do that.
So they don't have an incentive to completely kill the network, even though they could. So there's many things there, but they might have they might have an incentive to increase the block rate and to increase the block space available, basically. But yeah, let's start with the 51% thing, because I think it's more important than people usually thought it was before, because the Timewarp attack is not new. I didn't find it. Matt didn't find it. It's been known for a very long time, and people usually. Some people are usually dismissive of it because, it requires a 51% attack. Sure, but it completely changes the threat model of a 51%, right? Because in Bitcoin, we have this proof of work, which makes it so that a 51% attacker can only censor transactions for as long as he manages to keep the 51% active. So it continuously costs him money to censor transactions, which at the end of the day could make it after 1 day, after 2 days, after 1 month. In this case, with the Timewarp, if the 51% attacker manages to keep the edge it has over the network, it can kill the network in 39 days. So it changes the threat model, I think, of the 51%. That's the first thing.
And actually, just on that, can we just explain, you mentioned just killing the network. My understanding is they would basically mine out the remaining subsidy like straight away, and then would they just still be making blocks, but just happening like blocks would just be happening so quickly that it would just be like a bit of a farce, right?
Yeah, so blocks would be happening very quickly, which could cause a lot of issues with regard to convergence on the network. So nodes in different parts of the world could have not the same tip at the same time, have major reorgs. If you have major reorgs, it's like you can't trust your payments in Bitcoin. It would be a major issue for protocols using time locks, such as Liana, such as Lightning. Also, let's say if they mine 100,000 blocks right away, all your penalties on Lightning channels, all your HLCs, nothing is secure anymore. And then, of course, they could also, if in general, a 51% attacker is not incentivized it's not a regular entity incentivized to maximize profits. It's just like an outside attacker. And if they want to hurt the network, the block rate is the basic spam limit. So they could spam the UTXO set at a mad rate. So yeah, they could severely harm the network. I said kill to get it short, but they could severely harm it.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, okay. And so yeah, obviously that's a bad thing. We want to try to fix that, and I think it's one of those things that yeah, it just seems like it's kind of been out there, but I guess it's needed someone like yourself to kind of put the team on their back and actually go do the work of figuring out how to fix it and so on. So can you explain for us what would it take to actually fix this?
So the fix is actually pretty simple. So what you want to do is basically to put to remove the off by one on the 2015 blocks period. You want to put it 2016, but obviously just changing that is a hard fork, because updated nodes could treat blocks as valid, whereas a non-updated node could treat it as invalid. So what Matt proposed to do in 2019 is simply to tie the timestamp of the last block of a period with the timestamp of the first block of the next period, such as they can the first block of the next period can only be 10 minutes in the past as the last block of the previous period. So it basically annuls the possibility to do a time warp attack. And it's a very, very tiny fix. It's like a couple lines. Good.
Yeah.
Can I get back to the political games maybe also?
Yeah, sure.
On the time warp, because I think there is multiple aspects. So there is that about an outside attacker trying to harm Bitcoin could leverage the time warp attack. And there is also the fact that miners incentivized to maximize profit would not kill entirely the network, but they might be interested in increasing slightly the block rate to mine more transactions, to claim more subsidies that should have been allocated to miners from the future, and short-sighted users trying to just, I don't know, for instance, randomly put garbage on chain could be incentivized to deal with that, to pay less
users who, like,
fees.
let's say, spam users of the chain per se, like more block space or more to put their spam into, or even, let's say, even monetary users might want lower fees. So I mean,
Exactly.
it's kind of both sides. It's monetary users and spam users, let's say.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty bad incentives which are set in this case, because short-sighted miners can just increase their profit by leveraging this attack. Short-sighted users can just pay less fees by accepting this attack, and it all comes at the expense of the long-term health of the system, and that's not great. And also it can become more likely as the block reward diminishes exponentially. We might see miners play more games 4 years from now as the block reward really becomes small. So we might want to fix this before then. And by no means I want to urge people also, like, urgency is a red flag. We've lived with the time warp for 10 years, 15 years maybe. That's not urgent, but I think it's becoming potentially more urgent because there's more incentive for miners to try it now.
Back to the show in a moment. This show brought to you by CoinKites.com, the creators of the best Bitcoin hardware security devices, such as the Cold Card Mark IV and the new Cold Card Q. Now, we use Bitcoin hardware security devices to keep our keys offline, our private keys offline. Now, the way these work is you can do that setup, write down your 12 or 24 words on the seed word cards, and keep that secure. Now, you can use this device to interact with the Bitcoin network using software such as Sparrow Wallet, Electrum, or Vector Desktop, or Nunchuck as a few examples. Now, you have a range of security features that you can use with these devices, such as passphrases, you can use seed XOR, or my favorite is multi-signature. Now, If you're starting in a basic way, just start with the device and the USB-C cable, plug it directly to the computer and use it that way, and then later improve your setup. But I believe these devices are great at helping secure your coins, especially as you start to migrate up into multi-signature security. But don't be disheartened or don't be scared away. They are accessible, and I think you actually do learn about Bitcoin in the process. So to get yours, go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get a discount on your cold card. And now, back to the show.
Yeah. And look, I think this is something I've tried to make this point as well. Like, we talk about being low time preference. We should be fixing our bugs. We should be trying to keep our house in order. And so I think it is a good thing for people to talk about it and consider fixing it. So do you want to explain a little bit? Now, you mentioned Macarello had that idea in 2019 of how to fix it. Have there been any updates on that in terms of how to fix it, or are people kind of mostly agreed on how to fix this thing, or no?
For the Timewarp, I think there's broad consensus on the fix.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that's pretty much like that's done. And then let's talk about the other aspect, the block validation part. So can you explain what is the implication of, this block validation problem, or maybe if you could just explain what is this block validation problem to begin with?
Yes. So when receiving a block, a node validates the transaction inside the block. It validates that the Bitcoin exists. It validates that the person making the transaction actually could make the transaction. So this is done through the scripting system. So can this person actually unlock transaction? And all this process takes a little bit of time. For regular transactions, it takes nowadays, with the advances of the technology, to validate, notably with the libsecp and everything, it takes a very small amount of time. That's good because I was getting sidetracked. I'm getting back on the right track. So, and that's good. However, you can make pathological transactions in blocks, such as blocks become very expensive to validate for nodes on the network. That's bad because obviously we want to keep Bitcoin accessible. We want the barrier to entry to running a full node to be as low as possible. But it's especially bad because it can incentivize miners to play games. Because as a miner, right now I'm incentivized to include whatever transactions to get more fees. But if I can get my competition to actually be stuck on validating a block for 2 minutes, and I get an edge of 2 minutes, which is huge in terms of competition in the mining space, I might as well do that. And so it's possible today on Bitcoin to create blocks which can take up to 1.5 hours to validate on a Raspberry Pi, and about 3 minutes on a beefy server, which could typically be used by a miner. So,
and so there's an implication, and obviously, people want to keep the network decentralized, make it easy and accessible for people to run their Bitcoin nodes. You ideally want to help fix this idea of how to, as you said, craft these malicious transactions that are used to sort of maliciously take down somebody else's node, or to sort of make it really slow for them to be able to keep up, because then if there's blocks in quick succession, now people are falling out of consensus, and then it starts to become a bit of a shit show when you're trying to send transactions, and it's going to cause problems for everybody.
I didn't find blocks which would be as bad as making people unable to keep track of the chain, because the block which takes an hour and a half takes, I don't remember, but hundreds or dozens at least of blocks of preparation. You need to prepare to your attack. So it would not be as bad as completely fucking up the network, but it's still pretty bad.
I see. Yeah, and so as I understand, for security reasons, you don't want to necessarily say the exact mechanism of how that's done. But are you able to tell us a bit about where the fix ideas are for that, or at least where the community is out there, or at least the developer community?
So for the development community, so Matt Corler proposed some fixes back in 2019, and it actually, so as to your question from the beginning about where everything is at and what's happening, it's been the main point on which I've been working for the past 6 months, off and on, because obviously I've got a day job as well, but off and on I've been working on this point, which is trying to make sure, because I don't think so. I think, well, I found a block which could bypass the fixes from Matt from 2019. So I've been working on new fixes and figuring out, do my new fixes actually cover up all the possible attacks? So there's been inputs from a lot of people. So yes, that's where I'm at currently. I think we've settled, we being AJ gave me a lot of feedback and worked with me through different mitigations, and I think we settled on a couple proposals, couple small fixes, simple, obvious, and also interestingly and nicely, which have less of a potential confiscation aspect to them, which was a concern with the fixes from that.
And can you just explain this confiscation idea? As if I'm understanding it, it's like you're trying to make sure that there's not a possibility that maybe some older user has like lost access to their coins because of this fix that you've put in. Is that the rough idea?
Exactly. Basically, what the fix is making some behavior possible today invalid. And we want to make sure that nobody has potentially been using this behavior in the past, given that the recommended fixes from 2019 were in the scripting system. There were concerns around, well, maybe someone has hidden pre-signed transactions which were using a very weird smart contract and has deleted the private keys and everything. In this case, if we make the new feature invalid and the person does not broadcast his transaction for, 5 years, and then the soft fork activates, then he wouldn't be able to spend his
coins could be burnt or kind of frozen and not able to be spent potentially. But I guess this is like, you're talking about like a very edge case kind of, you're trying to make sure that there's not like this edge case person or people who are losing their coins out of this.
It's like, you can't get more edgy than that. It's like very, very, very far-fetched. But still, I think it's very good to be concerned for the development community to uphold this principle of never confiscating the money of Bitcoin users. And so we had, at first, I was proposing to actually only enforce the new rules for UTXOs created after a certain block height. So this theoretical, probably non-existing person, could still have spent his UTXOs because they were created in the past. So I scanned the UTXO set to see if there were no existing, potentially offending UTXO, and there is no existing, potentially really bad UTXO. So it would have been safe to do that in the future. But my new recommended fixes do not involve that anymore at all. So
I see. So it's even safer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, as you said, this has been your focus for the last 6 months. And it's not, I guess, ready to deploy now or anything, but it's like you're sort of you're pushing it forward. Can you explain a little bit about that next few steps and what you would like to see happen, after this?
Yeah, I don't know really. There is no handbook of how to walk those steps. I think I really got into it as a research project at first. Like, is it actually that bad? Like, nobody picked it up for 5 years. Maybe it's not that bad. Well, actually, it's a little bit bad. So I was trying to maybe convince myself that it was worth a whole soft fork. It was worth changing the rules of the game of Bitcoin. And I think I convinced myself that, yeah, we should probably do that. So that was the first step, convincing myself. Then there is convincing others. I think within the development community, if people think it's important, I've talked with a few other developers, presented at a few developers events, had pretty good receptive feedback. So yeah, I don't know what the next steps are going to be. At some point, I'm going to have to reveal these mitigations for the block validation time. I didn't want to give away what was the issue, but if I give away the fixes, people are going to figure out. So I need to figure out how and when to do that, because it's a soft fork. You have to have users' consentment anyways.
Yeah, that's going to be
I
a bit
don't know.
tricky, but let's just, yeah, I guess we'll just have to kind of hope for the best there, and see that if we can at least kind of build up enough support amongst kind of, the node committee, let's say the node people, the node runners, and maybe get some of the miners on board, to at least the mining pools at least on board, so that
I think we still have a bit more development to do, at least so writing a new BIP, because the BIP from Matt Corallo was not even included in the BIP repo. It was just a draft that he drafted, and then quickly after he left contributing to Bitcoin Core. So yeah, maybe writing a BIP, writing an implementation. AJ has an implementation of a bug fix for one of the bugs, another one from the consensus cleanup on his Bitcoin Inquisition. Could be a good way to start testing that in a semi-production, let's say.
This show also brought to you by mempool.space, the leading Bitcoin and blockchain visualizer. I use it all the time when I'm checking transaction fees and trying to understand what is the state of Bitcoin's mempool. You can search transactions, historical as well as unconfirmed ones, and also see a great way to visualize things across the Lightning Network, Liquid, mining, and so much more. Also, for those of you with an enterprise, they offer a mempool.space enterprise program. So for those of you as part of that enterprise program, you might want to get increased API limits, and you might want to have increased access to the team in terms of feature requests. You might want to have special branding in terms of how your custom instance of mempool.space looks. So to sign up for that, go to mempool.space/enterprise. And now, back to the show.
Okay, so yeah, when it comes to,
If they
I mean, yeah, I guess that's that, right? Like, it just kind of, you're at this point where you need to get enough popular support eventually. Eventually, you get to that point where you need to build up enough popular support, and that's just what it is. That's what it's going to take to get it over the line.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the Bitcoin Core vulnerabilities. I know a bunch of these were recently disclosed on the Bitcoin Core website. I believe just recently, July 3rd. And as we record this, it's July 23rd. So, 20 days ago. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about some of these Bitcoin Core vulnerabilities and why they're being, disclosed now?
So why? So there is why. Why now? Why? Because there is a lot of upsides to actually publicly disclosing vulnerabilities affecting a software, and especially in the case of Bitcoin. We want at first to inform users, like, well, we are developing a software. We are aware that there was a security vulnerability in this software. Would be nice if we tell you. Also, it's very important to inform development and to make sure that we can learn from our mistakes, because the security vulnerabilities are reported to a small subset of the Bitcoin Core contributors. There is a lot of contributors to... Oh, I think I lost you. Oh, no. Okay. Yep.
Oh, yeah, go on.
You froze for a little bit. Yeah. So, and there is a lot of contributors to Bitcoin Core, and different levels of contributions to Bitcoin Core as well. And most of them would not be aware of this security reports, and some would not be aware that there was a vulnerability at all. And yeah, in order to make sure that we improve the practices of development, make the software more secure, we need to learn from that. Also, we need to incentivize, well, maybe not incentivize, but give a clear process for security researchers, which may incentivize them to actually go through this process, or to actually start looking for bugs into Bitcoin Core at all. And if they find one, at least there is a standard process that they can follow out there. And instead of just never getting credited, or just if they don't get credit and get upset, I don't know, recklessly disclosing it, which could be bad as well. So we tried to get this standard process out there. And I guess one smaller point as well was to clear up some misconceptions about Bitcoin Core never having bugs, that it was not necessary to update the software, and it was putting users and the network at risk as well. So that's for the why.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point as well, because I have seen this. Even on my podcast, there have been some guests who've sort of come out with this idea of, oh, just don't update your Bitcoin Core. We don't have to kind of agree with what developers are saying, which at one level you could sort of say, yeah, but on the other level, you've got to remember there's security fixes that are coming. And sometimes there are security fixes that are done in a way that are hidden because the developers would rather not
If they don't
let there be unupdated nodes out there who are vulnerable to these kinds of DOS attacks or other attacks.
Yeah, as usual in Bitcoin, you are dealing with other people's money. So you need to be very, very conservative and try to obfuscate when you're fixing the bugs to try to not give it away. So we try to do that. Sometimes it's given away in public. Sometimes, most of the time now, it's not. There is also... Sure, like with regard to people saying never updating their node, it's always boils down to what's your best option. If you think that you can do a better job than the Bitcoin Core development contributors, sure, like you can fork the software. As long as you don't change the consensus rule, you should be able to connect to the Bitcoin network and try to go on about making a better software. But if you're not going to do that, you should probably update to the latest version of Bitcoin Core, because there's going to be bug fixes. So yeah, with regard to why now, like the other, I guess, like the other initiatives on Bitcoin and in Bitcoin Core as well, it's like just everything happened on a voluntary basis. Some people thought that it was an issue. Turns out that there was more than a couple of people that said it was an issue, and a few people volunteered to actually do something about it. And yeah, just starting to get the ball rolling. We started really discussing that in September at a core dev. So a core dev is just an event for Bitcoin Core contributors to meet in real life and have discussion in real life instead of on IRC all the time. And we started discussing that, and then we started to have a couple of us working on actually digging up past historical reports of vulnerabilities which were never publicly disclosed. And it took a lot of time. There were a couple of fun moments where long-time experienced contributors would like find old reports that they had forgotten about and be like, oh, we thought that we had 5 reports. Actually, there is a 6th one. I just found it. And then 1 week later, I just found a new one. Did you know about this vulnerability? Well, no, we didn't. So, and as we went through that, we tried to set up some software to keep track of vulnerabilities and start to triage them. In parallel, we wanted to come up with this standard process to treat vulnerabilities. So we discussed and came up with a process which we then tested on this historical bug report. Like, if this report gets reported right now, how do we treat it? When do we want to disclose it? How do we disclose it? And what severity do we assign it? And we've done that. Then we decided that we had a pretty good policy to start with. It's not set in stone, but it's better than the current situation. And we decided to share the policy we wanted to go for with the rest of the contributors, there were basically no objections, and a lot of people were excited about doing this work. So we went forward and we suggested that we would gradually start adopting this new policy for public disclosure. And the way we would do that is start by releasing the reports from the past 10 years and gradually up to the point where we are at the last version for which we want to disclose vulnerabilities. So we did that for all the bugs up to version 21 of Bitcoin Core, which was released in 2021. So more than 3 years ago. And then we released all the reports for back to 2015. So there was a lot of reports, but a lot of them were harmless, right? Nobody is running a Bitcoin Core from 2015 anymore. And so then we are going to release, so as you said, we are recording this on the 23rd of July, and we are going to release at the end of July the bugs in 21, which were fixed in version 22. Then next month in August, we are going to release, if there is any, the bugs in 22 fixed in 23. Then in September, the bug fixed in 24. And at this point, we will be at the version 25, and 25 is still supported. So maybe, yes, I should touch on that. Bitcoin Core,
right.
the latest
Can you
version.
talk a little bit about this kind of end of life, that aspect?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, there is a new version of Bitcoin Core every 6 months. And the Bitcoin Core maintainers and a couple of contributors maintain, well, a few contributors, not only a couple, a few, maintain version up to the latest -2. So the latest right now is 27, and 25 and 26 still get some bug fixes backported, and then a new version of 25, which is called Poinsot release, is released. So 25.1, 25.2, 0.3, and for those, we are not going to disclose the bugs. Then when 28 gets released, 25 goes end of life. When 25 goes end of life, if there was security vulnerabilities reported for it, we are going to announce it to the mailing list. And 2 weeks after that, we are going to publish the details about the
bugs and the vulnerabilities. Yeah. Okay. So just to summarize, as you said, on average, every 6 months, there's a new big version number, 25, 26, 27. 27, as we speak, is the latest. And so I guess you're saying for the latest release and then 2 releases behind that, there's some backporting. So that's the term you're using, which is relating to how, even though we're on version 27 right now, they may go back and fix some of the bugs in 25 or 26, and that's called backporting the fixes for the bugs. But then, once that particular version goes end of life, that's when these things are publicly disclosed, and it says, hey, this DOS bug was there, or this particular bug, and the details. So at that point, it's sort of like, you better be updated on one of the later versions so that you are not vulnerable to having your Bitcoin node taken down or something like this.
Yeah. So basically what you have 1 year and a half to upgrade to the latest version, and you always want to be on the latest version because oftentimes harmless bug fixes are backported to previous releases, but there is a lot less churn and a lot less new features and new development on old versions, which are still supported, and you can't just hide security fix in there. So oftentimes, point releases do not get security fixes. So if you want to always have the latest security fixes, you need to be on the latest major version. Yeah, just be on the latest major, and yeah.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I think it's an important point for people to understand out there. Did you have any other particular, we're not going to go through each of the individual ones, but it seems like just as I look at some of the ones that got released on July 3rd, or at least disclosed, it seems a lot of them relate to DOS using various different vectors, right? Whether it's difficulty headers or the INV messages, orphan handling. Is there anything in particular you want to mention, just kind of at a thematic level there?
Yeah, there is a few interesting ones, but I think one where a lesson can be drawn is the earliest one, the LCE from 2015, which was actually originates from a dependency in Bitcoin Core. So there is a ton of stuff that a software needs to do, and that usually you do not re-implement as a software developer. You use third-party libraries because you do not want to reinvent the wheel. But as it turns out, you do not maintain this code, and it is compiled and included in your software binary. So people are dependent on this code, and if this code has security issues, your software has security issues. And so this bug in particular was pretty interesting because some security firm audited this dependency, found buffer overflow inside, which is pretty bad in terms of vulnerabilities, because it allows potentially to execute code on the machine, on the victim's machine, which is as bad as it can get in terms of vulnerabilities. And when being informed of that, Vladimir Vanderlaan, long-time Bitcoin contributors and previously maintainers of Bitcoin Core, looked into trying into the other parts of the library and basically tried to edit it himself, and found another buffer overflow. And he found another issue, and this issue could actually have been exploited potentially on Bitcoin Core. It was exploitable on other software, but it was not demonstrated on Bitcoin Core, but it was very, very close. And I guess, yes, there is a lesson in how we need to handle dependencies, trying to potentially reduce the number of dependencies that we want to use in Bitcoin Core, to have in Bitcoin Core, to like maybe your fancy new use case, which needs this dependency library, could be cool to have, but maybe outside of Bitcoin Core instead of inside Bitcoin Core, which brings back to the discussion at the beginning of trying to draw a lesson for development as well. Try to secure Bitcoin Core going forward.
Yeah, interesting. And as you said, that it seems important to minimize dependencies, and I know that is what there are Bitcoin Core developers out there trying to
definitely
remove things, remove these kind of upstream things where possible. And so interesting. So I guess let's summarize a few of the key points. So we covered a lot of stuff today, but I guess the main thing is this great consensus cleanup idea. It is a soft fork, so it requires a soft fork because of some of the things that are consensus changes, right? As you said, this time warp bug and this off by one error, as well as certain aspects of how blocks are validated, that it would be a good thing to fix these things. And hopefully people are at least staying aware of these issues and, with an open mind to try to go and fix them. So I guess we'll leave it there. Any final closing thoughts for people?
Update your Bitcoin Core, especially if you're in 22, because we're going to announce vulnerabilities for 22 at the end of this month. So when this episode is out, upgrade to the latest version. Just upgrade to the latest.
Yeah. Okay, well, great. Well, thank you, Antoine, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.